Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Thank you so much for joining us. It is Thursday, September 17th, 2009. We're simulcasting the last hour and 52 minutes, as we do daily, at prisonplanet.tv. So we're now in the visual, not just on the radio. Thank you so much for joining us. For this segment, we've got Wayne Madsen of Wayne Madsen Report on with us. He's been trying to get into the flu conferences. He's been beating the pavement in D.C. and Maryland with intel about what they're planning with the flu. Now they're announcing body bags in the U.S., in Canada, with the flu shipments. Under level 6 flu pandemic, they admit they can set up checkpoints, have martial law under UN treaty. That's in the news. We are getting reports from military and police. In one case, at an event that Joyce Riley was at with a police officer, saying they'll set up checkpoints, arrest people, take them on buses to FEMA camps if they won't take the shots. That is in the executive order to arrest you if you refuse. They're doing weird Amber Alerts on the billboard systems at different pharmacies here in Austin, running reports about kidnapped kids and Alzheimer patients. They're not just on the big government billboards now, so they're testing that takeover grid. Is this just a cover to get the health care bill passed, to get the quote, financial reform bill passed, giving the banks more power? Is it a political cover? Is it a federalization drill? We've confirmed people getting the flu shot are being put in a database that they've had it. That's the beginning of, in this case or in the future, creating a database of who's had it and who has for quarantines. Police in major states are lobbying, and states are passing laws to go along with the feds for forced inoculation, arresting people, going in homes. That's the basic intel on that. Wayne Madsen, what are you hearing along those lines?
Well, I'll tell you, the fact is, I've been looking at where this flu came from, and I can report on your show for the first time that while the United States government won't look into this, a part of the funding for this research into this swine flu H1N1 came from the government of Japan. Now, with the new government there, Prime Minister Hatayama, hopefully they might, as one of their first steps, investigate the funding of this research, where they got this DNA out of this woman who died of the 1918 flu in Alaska, and how this was basically constructed in a laboratory. The word I get from the research community, definitely this did not happen naturally. This was manufactured in a laboratory environment.
Wayne, specifically, we talked to you a few weeks ago. You were going to try to get into that secretive flu symposium. We got the cover sheet for it saying mass graves, fatalities, quarantine. One of our people got in. We've now got the documents. They're printing them off for me. The details of the meeting, but he was kicked out. Were you able to get into that flu conference?
I was able to get into the flu conference. There was one anomaly. There was an individual who was there from the city of New York, the medical examiner's office, who headed up some sort of special investigation unit for 9/11, believe it or not. And when he found out that the press was invited to this conference, he basically pitched a fit and said, "You know, I don't want my comments recorded." He had his presentation on a thumb drive, his PowerPoint. He plugged it in. He took it out. There were no handouts, nothing from his presentation. So this guy's subject was mass fatality management, and apparently he's been going around the country giving various talks at various seminars. But it was quite clear in that particular case, that particular subject was considered some sort of top secret.
Wayne, what's the big picture here? What do you think's really going on?
Well, you know, I have to say we've been through this before. We had the anthrax case. Of course, anthrax is a bacteria. It's not spread from person to person. But we never had a full investigation of that. Now, and we know that the strain came out of Fort Detrick. Now we know with this particular H1N1 that it was recombinant. It was a recombinant two forms of human flu, two forms of swine flu, and one form of avian flu, and that it was constructed in a laboratory. There's obvious involvement by the Armed Forces Pathology Institute in Rockville, Maryland. Very likely also Fort Detrick, and two particular research centers were heavily involved: the University of Wisconsin at Madison and the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So there's enough information out there from the research community that this was a man-made virus. The question is to what intent, and was this a way to enrich these four vaccine manufacturers, because the vaccine was recently approved by the Food and Drug Administration? And if that's what it is, this is a potential major criminal case.
Incredible. Now, Dick Armey, and I'm no fan of Dick Armey of the Bush years, but he's come out in the Dallas Morning News and said this may be used as a cover to get government health care and to get other legislation passed during the hysteria. If they almost brought the country to its knees for a few dozen deaths in April from the H1N1, what is going to happen as normal deaths happen by the tens of thousands this flu season that's now kicked off? Do you see this being used as a political cover?
Actually, it's going to take so long to implement any sort of health care program. This is going to, this is very similar to the 1918 virus. The 1918 virus actually, like this one, it started. There was a bit of a surge in the spring of 1918. Then, at the end of September and October, it peaked in a very big way, killing millions of people around the world. It spread. There was one individual at the swine flu conference here who was a director of emergency services for Oklahoma. It was very interesting what he had to say. He went back to the city archives in Oklahoma City and looked at how this was spread back then. It was first there were reports out of Philadelphia, Boston, and New York. Troops were coming back from World War I from the front. They were heading back to the West Coast by train, going through Oklahoma City, and that's how it spread. And it killed thousands of people in Oklahoma City. When they first had people get the flu, the city fathers of Oklahoma City said, "Oh, it's just a bad case of hay fever," until they realized how bad this was.
So, is it just to make money for the vaccine makers? Is it a federalization drill? We've got reports, and they say under level 6 they can run checkpoints, force quarantine. They are keeping records of who gets the shot to create that database for who's complied and who hasn't. Bottom line, what do you see happening?
Well, there were two themes at the swine flu conference. One theme from the medical professionals. Their big thing was educate the public, let them know what the deal is. Then there were these FEMA types and the military types and the emergency services people, and their thing was, we have to be prepared for riots at the vaccination stations, forced quarantines. They did talk about checkpoints at various travel hubs. So there are two things. The medical professionals certainly didn't seem like they were buying off on all that business. But the FEMA types, the Homeland Security types, they were all present, by the way. And
they're always wanting to expand their control and their mandate, and the flu's perfect to make the American people the enemy. And that was in the cover sheet about quarantines. We're now getting the internal documents. Here in just a moment, we're going to put some of them on screen as well. You're saying that they're trying to use it for police state, but that people aren't buying.
Yeah, they were excited. I have to say they were chomping at the bit, saying, well, if we have rioting at the vaccination stations, and all this business, they were talking about invoking their quote-unquote protocols for this type of development, whereas the public health people, the people from the medical community, I got the distinct impression they're not singing off of the same song sheet. They're saying, look, we have to educate the public about this particular flu and don't hold anything back, full transparency. And certainly we weren't getting that from the emergency services, the FEMA Homeland Security people.
Were you able to get out of the conference with this, the internal report from the swine flu secretive conference?
I sat in several of the presentations and took notes. The The only one, as I said, where there was